We've got our create post functionality working, so logically the next thing we might want to do is edit existing posts. But if I think about it, my edit functionality is going to be incredibly similar to my create functionality. We're going to have all the same fields here. We're going to want the ability to associate any tag to the edited post, and we're going to want to be able to create new tags to also associate to that post. And for those of you familiar with front-end development and working with forms, you probably already know that a very good use for reusable components is when you create or when you edit something, that'll probably be the same form. So even though the form I just created was in the create post component, what I propose we do is first extract that logic out to a custom element, and then we will create the edit functionality using that newly extracted custom element. Let's go ahead and do this. Let's hop into our code base, and I'm just going to go ahead and pull open my create.html and my create.js. And again, if I look at this, what I'm going to want to do, maybe we'll just extract everything within this template here into a custom element. So I'm going to hop over to the command line, and within my command line I will go ahead and generate that component. So I'll say au generate element, and the element will be called, let's just call it the post form. So all I have to do is type that, and as we know, it'll generate a post form, and my app, which is being watched on the left side here, will be able to detect, hey, this component pair was just generated. Go back into the code, and I will go into the resources folder and the elements folder to find that this post form HTML and post form JS pair has been created. Great. So what I'll do is I'll take all of the HTML in my create template and put it into the post form.html file. Just cut that out, go over to post form.html, paste it in here. So a few things we can notice here. Let's just do some strategic planning. We see in this header element we say create post. We know we're also going to want that to eventually say edit post. So that could be a parameter that's passed from our whichever component that we're in. Additionally, we have the same thing in the button down here, create post. So I can basically change both of those into some sort of bindable parameter. Perhaps we'll just call it the title parameter. Great. Then we have on the form submit, we are delegating to create post, but that might not be the case when we're editing. We might want something called edit post. So let's just extract that and really up-level the concept here to maybe just submit. And we'll make sure that in our view model for this custom element, we just create a submit method, and we can then handle that at some point when we understand how. So what else do we have here? Well, everything else looks pretty much standard, like it might work with both creating and editing a post. So the only other thing that I recognize right now we're going to want to do is within my view model, instead of just saying bindable without value, we know that we are going to be getting a post, and we also know, because we just created it, that we will be getting a title. So we'll want both of those to be bindable to this custom element. Great. So let's go back to our create.html and make sure that we include this custom element. So I will say require from, and it's from resources, elements, and this will be the post form. And then of course I can include the post form custom element, and we'll want to make sure that we bind some things here. So we want to bind our post, and we will want to bind a title property that we haven't actually created yet. So let's make sure that we have that. Let's go back to our create.js, our view model. And so maybe where we set this .post equals to this default empty post, we can say this .title equals to create post. And then that'll be passed right on down to that custom form element, which is great. But if we go to our custom form, one thing that we notice is that when we submit this form, well, it uses this, it delegates to this submit method of the view model, and nothing happens here. So there's probably a few ways that we can go ahead and handle this, but I think one of the easiest ways is to pass the logic from our main component. So in this case, it would be from the create component. Let's pass our logic on what to do when submit is clicked. So that being said, what we can say is submit delegate. So when that submit is clicked, we can delegate to the create post method on this view model. So when submit is clicked within the post form, we are going to actually use the create post method on the create.js view model. And here we go. This is our create post method. So now we've rewired this back to use the logic that's within this view model. Again, we don't necessarily want to put this logic into the custom element because that would then tether the functionality too much to creating a post, whereas we would also want this to work with editing or updating a post. All right, so that's pretty good. What else do we want? Well, so we know that the tag functionality, so being able to add a tag to the list or just getting the tags in the first place, well, that's not going to be unique to creating a post. That's also going to be with editing a post. So maybe we want to bring this logic to our custom element. So let's go ahead and do that. First, let's bring the logic that populates all of our tags. So I'm just going to go ahead and take that out and go over to the post form view model, and we can just do this on the attached lifecycle hook. And okay, great. So we're populating all of our tags here, but we don't actually have the post service here. So let's make sure we bring that in, and let's make sure we bring our dependency injection in. So we can just add that now from and we are a couple levels deep here. If you look on our left side here, we're within elements and within resources. So if we want to go back out to our services, we got to go a couple layers out. So we're going to get this from common. And again, I'll just uncollapse that folder so we can see common, services, post service. And then using our dependency injection, we're getting used to this pattern by now. And we can use our constructor. Okay, great. So we brought in our post service, we brought in our dependency injection container, used our dependency injection with the decorator here, and then finally included it in the constructor, so that now when this custom element is attached, we can get and populate all of our tags from our post service. So that's great. I think there's just one more piece of logic that we might want to include as well. So I'm going to go back to my create.js view model. This add tags method, well, this is actually just unique to the form itself. So let's bring that over as well and just drop it in to our view model. And so now when I look at the post form.html, yeah, this click delegate, when we add a tag here, that's going to now work because we are just calling this add tag method on the post form view model. And I think that should be all set up pretty well to go. So let's bring open our application and give this a shot. So I'm going to go ahead and log in as Jane Doe. And I'm going to click new post. So let's just make sure that all this functionality works. So I'm going to associate a couple tags here, JavaScript and Aurelia, and then I'll add something else as an additional tag. Okay, so that added correctly, so I'm pretty happy about that. And so I'll just click create post. Okay, and here we go. This is my new post. It's got today's date, which is February 11th, and it's got all of our tags here, and it's got the body of the new post. So it looks like it added the somebody else tag on the right side here, and it added the archive. So everything is working exactly as we would want. But of course, we're really happy now because we've put this logic in a custom element, and now we can theoretically and hopefully painlessly use that custom element in an edit component and really have extracted all that logic and put it into this one element. So let's go ahead and rig up our edit component. I'm going to go to the command line. I'll type au generate component, and this will be the edit component, and it will be in the posts subfolder. Okay, great. So it's been created, and we can see on the left side that it's our app has detected that that's been created. So I can go open up within this post directory. I can open up our edit.html and our edit.js. I'll just pull these over to the right or to the left. And I can then say, well, our template, we're going to want to make it pretty similar to our create template, where we bring in the custom elements, and then we also bind our data to the post form custom element. So we're going to paste that in there. But instead, when we do the submit delegate, instead of creating a post, perhaps we'll want to call this edit post. And of course, we need to then handle this. We actually have to create all of these items in our edit.js view model. So I'm going to start with the logic that we have in our create.js view model, and I'm just going to copy that over. And we will rename this the edit class again. So what do we want to do here? Well, so the title we know is going to be edit post. This method we decided would be called edit post, and we on the post service we don't necessarily want to use the create method, so let's go ahead and open our post service and see what this is going to be called. And if I scroll down, we've got okay, it's the update method on our post service, and we just pass a post to it and it returns a slug. Great. So let's go back to our edit view model. Let's say update, and we're actually already handling this pretty well here. So if it is updated, then our event aggregator is going to tell the rest of the app that hey, a post has been changed. Let's make sure we have correct data across the application. And we're going to then use our router to navigate to the actual view of that post by binding this slug parameter that's returned from our service. Great. So that's pretty good, but one big difference between creating and updating is we're not actually going to start out with this sort of empty post. What we're going to need to do is actually find the post that's being referenced in the router. So what I want to do before I kind of dive into doing that is let's set up our router in our app.js file so that we kind of really understand what we're doing here. So I'm going to go to app.js in my source directory, and I will copy one of these, and I'm actually going to copy the view post because the edit's going to be quite similar. The route will be post, and this is just a very resourceful routing convention. So I'll say post slash, we'll have this the slug parameter, and then I'll say slash edit, and that'll be telling our route that we want to edit a particular post. And so we'll call the name post edit. The module ID, well, we just created the edit component within our post directory. And finally, the title can be called edit post. Okay, great. So now that we know this is our route structure, we know that we are going to have this slug parameter passed to our new component. So let's handle that. Let's use that slug to be able to get the current post that we're trying to edit. So again, if I go back to my edit.js view model, well, we can't do this in the attached lifecycle hook, but we know we can do it in the activated lifecycle hook. So type activate, and we know that that can get the parameters that are passed through the URL. And so rather than having all this, what we can say is this dot post service dot, and the method is find, and that will take our slug parameter. Then we will get the data from that. And otherwise we will catch any errors. And right now I've been console logging the errors, which is fine currently, but we are actually going to refactor our errors in general to use a much more logical way of handling and displaying nice errors to our user, and we will get to that shortly. A good thing to do rather than, so what I'm going to have to do is go back and kind of refactor everywhere where I've either logged or displayed an error in some way, and that's going to be kind of a pain. So the more experience you get with developing these front-end applications, you'll probably know that from the get-go I need a graceful way to handle my errors, and from the get-go I need to kind of think logically of what custom elements to eliminate redundancy I might create. So you'll get more and more used to this as you go, and the nice thing about Aurelia is it makes all of it really, really easy. Anyways, that little diatribe aside, on line 17 here, I will now set the post equal to data.post, which will be returned once we pass the slug to this find method of the post service. Great, so now I believe our edit.js file is looking good. Once it activates, it'll get the parameter, it'll populate our post, it'll also set the title equal to edit post, which will make our custom element title and submit button look nice. And then the edit post method here will now update the post that has been passed. So this is all very good news, and we're going to go ahead and try it out. Well, actually, I'm going to go over to my application, and I would try it out. Well, I can click view post, and one thing I can do is perhaps I can, in my URL, say /edit, and that'll get me to the edit page. But I think we would all agree that we would rather be able to see a link on one of these pages. Maybe we'll put it on the view page. That'll tell you that you can edit the post, and it'll give you a nice way to get there. So let's create that right now. So I'm going to close a lot of these windows because it's getting a little overwhelming. And within my post subfolder, I'm going to go to the view.html. In fact, I'll just open up the view model as well. But within the HTML, I'll add a link at the bottom here. And right now it'll go to nowhere. And we'll just say edit post. And so actually, let's go ahead and just build out this route. So we know the route is named post edit. Actually, I believe it is. Let me go ahead and check the app.js file to make sure. Yes, so the name of this route is post-edit. So the route is post-edit. And we also know that we are going to have to bind a parameter here. And that'll be the slug. So we bind to slug, post.slug. Great. And so if I go back to my application, let me make that look a little nicer. So we can give this a class equals to btn, maybe btn primary. Cool. So great. So now we have this handy edit button, and I can click on it, and it takes me to the edit page, and I've got everything populated, which looks really good, which is great, except that I am not logged in as the person who should be allowed to edit this post. I'm not logged in as anybody, so it's actually not a good idea to be showing this edit link. It's also not a good idea to kind of allow me to easily see this edit post page if I'm not logged in. We'll get to that in a later video as well, but for now we're going to just accept the fact that someone kind of unauthorized can see that, although in the end state that would obviously be very bad. So for now, let's just get this button conditionally displaying if I'm logged in. So I'm going to go back to my view.html, and well, what can I do? So I'm thinking that within this this a tag we can say if bind, and perhaps we'll have some sort of logic here that will say, only show this if the current user is also the person who owns this particular post. So how can we do that? Well, let's open up our view model, and we know that we can get the current user from our auth service, so let's pull that in. I'm just going to copy the post service, and we'll say let's import the auth service from auth-service. We'll use our dependency injection, which becomes extremely important for the auth service, so that we want to make sure that we're using the same exact object that's holding our current user. So this.auth service equals auth service. Great. And so now we have our auth service. So within our view.html, and perhaps I'll space this out a little more to make it look a little cleaner. So if.bind, so we can say auth service current user, if that equals to the post.author, then we can show this link. And we'll talk a little bit about what I'm doing here, conditionally displaying this link. Certainly front-end logic like this, and in general, and I'll go over this a lot more in a different video, a later video. In general, any sort of quote-unquote security or authentication that you enforce on the front end, someone really motivated can circumvent that. So what the golden rule is that your back end needs to be ironclad, and your front end should really, it should definitely not let people easily see parts of the application they shouldn't be able to. But more importantly, the back end is going to be what really enforces any security in your application. And your front end, if you really want to approach this in a safe way, think of your front end as a user experience tool rather than a security enforcement tool, and I think you're going to be a lot happier with the end result. So that being said, I've created this logic. Now I'm going to open my browser, and I can see, okay, that button doesn't exist. So sure, the user can currently type in edit in the URL, but they can't easily get to that route if they don't know what that route looks like. There's no button that displays, but I can log in now as Jane Doe, and this is a Nick Shalley post. I can click view post. Again, there's nothing there. But if I go back and I go to my second post, which is a Jane Doe post, and click view post, well, here we go. We have our edit post button. So let's try it out. We'll click edit post, and we're happy to see that the post itself is populating as we would hope it would. We have our edit post label here and also on the button, so we're happy about that. We can rename it just my second post edited, and our body, we can just say like edit. I just want to make sure that things are being saved over. So within our tags here, let's add a bunch of tags. We can just add Aurelia, we can add Lorem, and again, we'll add something else. Add tag. Yep, our logic still looks good. If I click the edit post button, okay, so my second post edited. We have our edit here. We have all of our tags here, and with this new something else tag, it's been pushed to the sidebar, which we're happy about. The archive date didn't display here because when we edit a post, we don't have logic to edit the created at timestamp, which, really depending on your requirements, you might do that or you might not do that. But at any rate, it looks like everything's working, and we've kind of encapsulated all the that edit form into its own element, which is great. So that's all I wanted to cover this time around. We now can submit new posts. We can now edit posts. We might have a little concern that if I go into my third post and I just edit the URL and say edit, yeah, I can see that, and I shouldn't be able to because I'm Jane Doe and this is Nick Shalley's post. So we can definitely cross that bridge. We will address that at some other point, but for now, we're pretty happy with our functionality.